Very nice. I'll take an extended 20-minute tutorial.
I would love to see a longer, more detailed instructional video about this.
These types of explanations should flow.
Don't worry, it's simple. Then proceed to do wizard magic.
Go over this like 10 times slower.
Do the full step-by-step tutorial, period. Otherwise, don't pretend you like to do definitely missing a lot of stuff, even using Google to actually help you a full video on this. I like that there are tutorials not aimed at beginners. I don't need this to be any longer. Oh, thanks. Okay, fine, I'll do it. You're lucky I really like this method. So, one big problem with super stylized characters is that you tend to want super stretchy and exaggerated expressions, but because of how normal meshes and rigging work, it's hard to make them look satisfying. But with the method I'll show in this video, we can use what's called a live Boolean to cut the shape of the eyes and mouth out of the head, so we don't have to worry about topology at all. To describe what a live Boolean is, for one, it uses a Boolean modifier. In this context, Booleans are basically like 3D cookie cutters, where you can add the modifier to one object, select a different object as a target, and it'll cut out that exact shape. You tend to want to apply the modifier, but when we use a live Boolean, we keep the modifier there, so it continuously cuts out the shape as we move the Boolean object. This is what we can do to cut out the whole mouth and eyes of a character, so we could pose the Boolean object to pose those parts. It works super well, but of course, one big sacrifice is that Booleans can get super laggy on less powerful systems, so just be aware of that. Also, of course, this only works inside of Blender since it relies on modifiers, so this can't be used for game engines or VR chat. Also, if you were wondering what that bit at the beginning was about, I actually made a short tutorial about this method a while ago, where a lot of people said they needed a longer tutorial to understand what's going on. So that's what this video is. If you're a relative beginner learning this method, I'll try and go through the process in a lot more detail, so you can get it. In some cases, this method is easier than dealing with topology, so I would recommend it for beginners to at least try, at least after learning the basics of character modeling. Although, if you do have a lot more Blender experience, you can also get the gist of the process from that short if you want. I'll still show a lot more details, methods, and fixes than that short though, so let's get into it. So I'll start with the head. This is the character I made in my beginner character modeling series, which I'd recommend you go through if you never touched character modeling at all yet. I show how to build this head there, but this method works on almost any object, so you can just test it on a sphere or whatever yourself. I'm going to make both eyes and a mouth using this method, but you can really make anything that needs a hole with it. Step 1. Make the shape of the mouth bag using the cylinder. It's pretty simple, but there are a few things to think about. Mainly, you need to think about how many edges you want around the cylinder. More edges means there are more points of control on your mouth, but of course, that also means more bones you'll need to control later. I'll just make mine 8 edges around, because that'll show the process well enough. My Pomni model has 12 though, so it just depends. I'm also going to have no cap fill. Now just move and rotate the cylinder so it's at the same angle as the muzzle section of the head. So something like this. Then we can just press E to extrude, click, and scale it up to form the front of the inner mouth bag. Extrude again to the back, extrude again, and then press M and at center to close it. And that should basically be all we need. I'd recommend you at least move these verts to fit the curvature of the face, since that just makes it look nicer. As for the front of the cylinder, it's not the most necessary, but what I like to do is build out a new cover that works a bit better than the default triangle fan. I just fill in these sections with F, and then Ctrl R to add an edge across. It'll make things slightly more clean when you make the mouth extra big. You can also set up a mirror modifier if you want, but when you add a subdiv modifier, you can see that the hard edges round out. So select each of these edges and add a crease of 1 here so they become sharp again. Normally, you would press Shade Smooth here too, but we actually don't want that, and you'll see why in a second. Let's call the cylinder MouthBool. Let's add the Boolean modifier to the face, and select the MouthBool as a target. Also, put it at the very end of the modifier stack. Just to let you know, these 3 buttons on the modifier might help you fix some lag. The first one, Float, is called Fast in earlier versions, and is super quick, but breaks easily. Exact is obviously more exact, and it has these extra settings which can fix basically any Boolean glitching you might experience, but that creates some insane lag. The one I'd recommend is Manifold, which is much newer and is a good balance of being more stable while still being pretty fast. If it's still not fast enough though, try Float. If it fails, just know that the object needs to be closed, so there can't be any holes in the object. Now to see it work, you need to hide the MouthBool shape, but never delete it. Once I'm done rigging it, I put it in a collection called Unused, so I can hide it permanently. But as you can see, something weird is going on around the lips. It's trying to transfer the shade smooth of the MouthBool to the head. And since the topology created by the Boolean is so bad, it looks like this. But you can just fix it by selecting Shade Flat. You can see that it's flat on the inside, but since I actually recommend making the inner mouth basically pitch black, you won't see it in the end. I've also seen with some other people that you might still see some weird artifacting for certain low poly characters no matter what, so just be warned about that. Let's add the materials then. To make the MouthBool's materials transfer to the inside of the mouth, add the material you want the inner mouth to be to the head. Then you need to add the exact same material to the MouthBool. The program will read that both of these materials are the same, and it'll change all the faces created by the Boolean to be that material. Now it's black. That's basically all the modeling we need to do, but lots of people on the short ask how to make teeth for this kind of mouth. The good news is that the teeth and tongue work exactly the same as any other mouth rig. If you need to know how to build them, I show a way in my character modeling tutorial, but I'll just add those here to save time. Now you can see one issue. Since the cut of the lip is perfectly flat, there are some areas where the skin of the body blends perfectly into the teeth. Obviously it won't be a problem if your character's skin isn't pure white, but I'm going to tell you a fix to this anyway. It uses geometry nodes, and people were freaking out in the shorts comments about it, but I swear this is one of the easiest geometry nodes setups out there. Basically what we can do is extract the edge around where the MouthBool and the head meet, and turn that into a curve, and give it thickness and a material, creating this sort of line lip around our Boolean mouth that always conforms to the mouth as we pose it. First, add a new object and give it a geometry nodes modifier. It doesn't matter what shape the object is, because we're going to override any base geometry in the Geonodes setup. I'll call it lips geo. So to start, add 2 object info nodes. And for one, obviously choose the MouthBool object, but for the other, select the head. No, but I'll need to show you why once we set everything up. Make sure both are set to relative though, that's super important. Then add a mesh Boolean node, and plug the object info nodes into mesh 1 and 2. Then add a separate geometry node, then plug in both the mesh and intersecting edges sockets into the geometry and selection sockets. That output only appears when you have exact or manifold selected here too. The intersecting edges output is used to select which newly created edges need to be extracted by the separate geometry node. So right now, what we have is just the edge around where the MouthBool and head meet. But you can see something's wrong. The edges are all over the place. This is because since we have the actual head selected in the geometry nodes, it's taking the intersecting edges from after the original Boolean modifier is applied. So it selects a ton of the inside mouth too. To fix this, what I do is I actually make a duplicate of the head, remove the Boolean modifier and other modifiers like my outline solidify modifier to keep it simple, and call it head fake. Then, in the Geonodes, select the head fake object instead. Since it doesn't have a Boolean, it'll just take the edge from the intersection point, making it all work. Just remember that if you rig the rest of the head later on, duplicate the head again and make a new head fake so it stays updated. Otherwise, the lips might not match the actual head. Back to the Geonodes, now that we have a solid curve here, we can just convert this mesh to a curve with this node, and then back to a mesh with this node. We do this so we can use the curve circle node to fill in that curve with a shape, so choose how thick you want the line to be here. That's actually it, although we need to set the material and set shade smooth in the Geonodes setup too, since anything in the base mesh gets overridden here. I'll make it the same black as the mouth. And that's all the physical part of the model, so let's get to rigging it. It is extremely easy, but of course it'll be way easier when you have prior rigging experience. My character modeling series has a rundown for rigging for beginners if you need that. It's the first 12-ish minutes of the rigging part. Anyway, make sure the MouthBool object is visible and has wireframe and all edges turned on, because we need to add 1 bone for each edge on the MouthBool cylinder. Since the MouthBool will be hidden, I like adding the bone right at the edge of the mouth. Make one side, call it something like mouth.l so they can be mirrored across to the other side. Select them, right-click, and press Symmetrize. Then add 1 more bone in the middle edges, and 1 in the opening of the mouth, which I'll call Mouth Master, and 1 for the inner mouth just in case, which I'll call Mouth Inner. Parent all the lip bones to the Mouth Master, so you can move them all at once if you need to. To parent the MouthBool to these bones, select it, select the rig, Control P, and parent with empty groups, since it's actually pretty simple to assign the weights ourselves. Doing that added a vertex group for each bone, so now we can go into edit mode, and turning on edge select mode can make this process way smoother. Select one edge, figure out what the bone nearest to it is called, and find that name in the vertex groups, and assign a value of 1. It'll make that edge follow that bone perfectly. As usual, you want to move the armature modifier above the subdiv modifier, so it smooths out after it's moved by the rig. But make sure the Boolean modifier is below everything. It should go armature, subdiv, Boolean. Then just repeat that process for each edge. Select it, find the vertex group for its bone, and assign a 1. Don't assign anything for the master bone in the middle, since that's just for moving the other bones. For the inner bone though, go back to the vertex select mode and select the entire mouth bag and assign a 1 to the mouth inner bone, so you can move the whole thing around with that bone. Now for my case, we need to assign some weights for the verts in the front. I'll just assign a 0.5 to the bones above and below it, so it totals to 1. So I'll set it to 0.5, select the top bones group, assign, then the bottom one, and assign. Do the same for the ones on either side. This should maintain the shape just a bit better than if it was an n-gon or a triangle fan like it is by default. And that's the whole thing done. Hide the MouthBool, and you can move each bone to form the shape of the mouth. And personally, I think it comes out super appealing. This is also where you find out how laggy this method is, so make sure to mess around with the settings in the modifier like I mentioned. I'll also explain some ways to help with lag in a second. Really quick, I'll show how to set this up with the eyes. To make it easy, let's just go into edit mode with the MouthBool and add a cube while there, so all the settings are the exact same. I'll add some loops to the side with Ctrl R to subdivide it manually a bit, and add a crease of 1 to the outside edge so it forms more of a hemisphere. Stick that shape into the head where the eyes are, and it should work immediately. And I'll also add a crease to this edge to create a more pointed eye shape, and move things into place so they look good. You can also rig it the exact same way, by adding a bone for each edge, parenting again with empty groups, and then assigning a 1 to each edge according to what bone is nearest to them. Now you can shape the eyes just like you did with the mouth. The one thing I'd recommend doing differently here is adding a plane to each eye socket, then adding a circle for the iris, and shrink wrapping it to that plane. I covered the whole process of how to set that up in my character modeling tutorial, and how to rig the iris in my shape keys tutorial, so to save time, just go to those videos for that info. Technically, a lot of eye types work here. That's just what I recommend. If you want, you could just use a Boolean mouth and something like my 2D eye tutorial for the eyes. You can mix and match. To parent the bones to the rest of the body rig, select the face armature in object mode, then the body rig, mine is a rigify rig, and press Ctrl J to join them to that rig. Select only the master bones and the inner bone, and then the head bone, and then Ctrl P and keep offset. Then you have to reassign what armature the MouthBool is following in its modifier. Now, moving the head will move the master bones, which will then move the rest of the bones. And since every vert on the Boolean is assigned to at least one bone, it'll bring along the whole Boolean as well. Make sure the head fake is also set up to follow the rig the exact same way as the base head, so the lips geo object is created in the right place. Now your whole face uses Booleans, but there are a lot more tips I should give to help you through the process. First off, one major weakness of this method is making a closed mouth. You have to be very careful to make sure the edges of the Boolean don't overlap, because that could break the Boolean and make it look weird. You'll want to find a good neutral position for the mouth, and save that as a pose by selecting all of the mouth bones, going to Pose, Create Pose Asset, and saving it there. That way it'll be easier to create that mouth again. Second, if you don't like using bones for whatever reason, you can also add shape keys to the Boolean object and pose them that way. If you want to add eyelashes or more detailed lips, I'd recommend doing that instead, since trying to make those parts follow the perfect shape of the bones is way more complicated and messy. Third, one easy way to save lag is to disconnect the head from the rest of the body with P in edit mode, so the Boolean is only calculating against the head and doesn't have to care what the rest of the body is doing. If your head is directly connected to the body, then I'd recommend detaching it if you want to use this method. It'll seriously save you a ton of lag, and characters that are stylized enough to use this method are also stylized enough to not need a perfectly connected head. Fourth, if you're using an inverted whole outline like I am, with the solidify modifier and all that, things can get a bit messy, but there is a fix. First, hopefully you know that you can edit the thickness of the outline in the solidify modifier itself with a vertex group. So what we need to do is transfer a vertex group from the MouthBool to the head, and use that to shrink the outline to 0. So, add a vertex group to both the head and the Boolean, and make sure it has the exact same name on both objects. It is case sensitive. Then, make sure the whole head has a value of 1 in that group, and the Boolean a value of 0. Then add that group to the outline solidify modifier of the head. That should automatically transfer the group data to the head after the modifier, like it did with the materials. But I found that it's kind of hit or miss sometimes, so if it doesn't work, try this method. Add a data transfer modifier to the head. Move it below the subdiv and above the Boolean modifier. Select the Boolean object in the source selection, and check vertex data and groups. And in the groups dropdown, select the outline vertex group so it only transfers over that group. Now hopefully, that'll make it so the outline shrinks to nothing wherever the Boolean is. Make sure to keep the data transfer modifier there, since you'll always want to keep transferring over that data as the Boolean moves. For some reason this method didn't work for me in the recording, but it has worked for me in the past, so I don't know. Fifth, since I'm someone who likes using color attributes, you'll see that these booleans will mess with that as well, since it's trying to transfer these attributes of the boolean to the head, like with the shade smooth. But we can use the data transfer modifier in a similar way to fix this too. This time, add whatever color attribute you need to the head, but then add one with the exact same name to the head fake. You'll want to make the one on the head fake the one you actually edit, since we'll need it to replicate the attribute data on the base head. So I'll add a blush as an example. It's already set up on my material, so now add another data transfer modifier to the head, but put it after the Boolean modifier. Select head fake as the source, and then vertex data, but select colors this time, which is for transferring color attributes. Now that should transfer all the attributes from the head fake to the head after the Boolean is applied. And since the head fake doesn't have any Boolean modifier, it's way more clean. I've also found that using the next tip doesn't seem to mess up the color attributes in any way, so consider using it. And finally, if you think dealing with the head fake is annoying, you can actually do the whole Boolean process in geometry nodes with only a few extra nodes. Add the geometry nodes modifier to the head instead, and make sure there's no Boolean modifier, since we'll be doing all that in the geometry nodes itself. Building off from what we had before, obviously delete the object info node with the head fake, and just plug in the base geometry to the Boolean node. Now we need to add a join geometry node at the very end, and plug both the set shade smooth node and the geometry of the Boolean node into that, so they can both exist in the final product. And that's it. While it may sound easier, I assumed people might be more intimidated by Geonodes, so I had to explain it just using the modifier first. If you didn't already set it up, you might need to add a vertex group to the head's outline solidify modifier, because otherwise it'll try and add that outline to the lips, which is obviously wrong. Just make sure the head is set to 1 in the group, so the newly added geometry will be set to 0 and won't have an outline. Also, just as a warning, if you go into weight paint mode with this head, all your vertex groups will appear as if they have 0 value, but that can be fixed just by turning the Geonodes modifier off. Just thought you'd like to know. And that's it. There are a lot more things you can do with Booleans, but for the sake of this video, that's where I'll leave it. I'll link the script to this video below if you want to go back and find any details there. If you want to see everywhere I post stuff, go to my Linktree, or click the video link to go to my Character Modeling for Beginners series if you want to learn everything that goes into making a character. See you later.